Okay, good, because
We
she's
share
a
this.
good, and I haven't contacted her in a long, long time. From way, way, way back, they used to come up early.
Oh, lovely.
Huh. So I thought, I just didn't know there's that many Shivas around. But I was
I
like,
also
right
work in the film, so it's related.
Good. Anyway, I'm going to contact Shiva afterwards anyway. See, it's been 20 years. I used to see them every time I went through Delhi. Shiva and Son. Ines Matilde. Okay. Namaskar. Kaise aap? Okay, it's 5:05. I guess we start. It's hard to tell when people are on other media if they're here or not. I don't know. We'll have a different operator today. Felipe is gone, and somebody else is doing for the weekend. So, any virtue we generate, we accumulate through listening, discussing, reflecting on the Dharma. May it serve as a cause for our awakening. So only when we are awakened or more awake will we be effective or more effective in benefiting all beings. Sangye chodan soke chona fa changchu baru da nikyap suchi tage jinsogi personam ki rola penchir sangye drupar sho Sangye chodan soke chona fa changchu baru da nikyap suchi tage jinsogi personam ki rola penchir sangye drupar sho. The four immeasurable thoughts. Maitri, love is the first one. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, which is exactly the definition of Maitri, love. Unconditional love, wishing another to have happiness in its cause. Not loving someone because they're beautiful, because what they give us, because they're nice to us, etc. Merely pure unconditional. And then compassion. May all beings be free of suffering, the causes of suffering. Causes of suffering, which is compassion. Compassion, but not pity. It's very exact what compassion is. Love and not attachment. We're going to go back today a little bit into love and attachment, back into the afflictions. May all beings never be separated from bliss, which is free from sorrow. And may all beings abide in a state of equanimity, free of the extremes of attachment and aversion, greed and hate.
Hello, is my mic on? Hello?
Everybody can hear? Okay. So the Heart Sutra. Homage to the holy perfection of wisdom. Thus I have heard at one time the Lord was staying at Rajgir on Vulture Peak Mountain together with a great host of monks and a great host of Bodhisattvas. At that time the Lord was composed in the concentration on the course of Dharma called profound illumination. At that time also the noble Lord Avalokita, the Bodhisattva and Mahasattva, in the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, looked down, but he beheld the 5 Skandas and that in their own being they were empty. So by now you should understand what's happening. The Buddha's gone into trance. He's speaking through these two, and Avalokiteshvara looks down. The 5 Skandas are what we are. There's a Skanda. By the time you're done, you're going to know all the Skandas. And sometimes they're the 5 parts. Basically what we are is we're body, which is Skanda form, and we're mind, which is the other 4. Mind is divided into primary consciousnesses, the 5 sense consciousnesses, and primary mental consciousness, and 51 mental factors. Mental factors arise in the mind. They're not always there. Some of them are there. They're called the ever-present ones that help us to distinguish objects. But the ones we work with the most, like the negative ones of greed, attachment, pride, jealousy, anger, and the positive ones of love, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity, rejoicing, etc. And so we want to cultivate the good ones and habituate ourselves to them and lessen the negative ones. And so the Buddha, the translation of Skandas is a bad translation, the ones you get. Aggregates. Aggregate sounds really concrete. The only place I ever heard aggregates used in my life as I was growing up was when they were being gravel and making roads, the big chunky pieces of gravel, the aggregate stuff for the road. I mean, but later I learned it in other contexts, but it's not a good translation. The translation is literally heaps, because there's a heap of form, all of the different changing aspects of form. Like a pile of dust, a heap of dust. Form is just a pile of all these different parts and sensations. Then there's a pile of feelings, which is what we feel when something appears to us. We feel it's good or bad or neutral. And then there's perceptions or discriminations. I have to look which translation they use here. Which is something feels good, bad, or indifferent, and we want the good, we don't want the bad. And all the other 49 mental factors are lumped into a category called volitional formations, karmic volitions. There's different translations for some of these. And the last is consciousness, which is the sixth, as I mentioned before, the sixth sense consciousnesses, five sense consciousnesses, and gross mental consciousness. We're not at subtle consciousness yet. That comes. And the reason the Buddha actually gave these names, because what we are these five heaps. And when you do insight meditation, you look to see what's going on inside. You look at the body; it's changing all the time, permanent. It's just a heap of sensations, isn't it? Instead, we make it also solid. We worship our body, etc., etc. Some people look in the mirror and get scary when they get old. Anyway, yeah. So, and each one is just a heap. And as I said before, he gave an entire skanda, an entire heap of feeling. Because when something appears to us that appears to be intrinsically existent, self-existent, existent from its own side. And so what comes from that, we feel that something is good or bad, or we're indifferent. And then it becomes good from its own side. It exists from its own side, so we feel it's good from its own side, beautiful from its own side, etc., etc. Just like we're working with attachment, we're going to go back to the skanda. We're going to go back to working with the factors, the cause of suffering, attachment again when this is done. So we're bringing it up again there. So that's what's going on. He looked down and he just found these five heaps and saw that they were empty. That time the noble Avalokita, the Bodhisattva Mahasatva, in the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, looked down. He beheld that five heaps, skandhas, and that in their own being they were empty. They were not existing from their own side. They were dependent on their parts, dependent on causes and conditions. Dependent on somebody knowing them, they were very much dependent. Because if something is intrinsically dependent, if it's self-existent, it's a non-existent. It doesn't exist. The definition of a non-existent is something existing from its own side, etc. Then, through the inspiration of the Buddha, the elder Shariputra said to the noble Lord Avalokita, the Bodhisattva and Mahasatva, how should any son of a good family train who wishes to engage in the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom? And the noble Lord Avalokita, the Bodhisattva and Mahasatva, spoke to the elder Shariputra as follows. Shariputra, any son or daughter of a good family who wishes to engage in the profound perfection of wisdom, should look upon it thus. He or she beholds the five skandhas, and that in their own being are empty. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not different from form. Likewise, feelings, recognition, sometimes called perceptions or discriminations. Volition and consciousnesses are empty. Empty of intrinsic findability because it's relativity. So, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness, lacking differentiating marks. They are not produced or stopped, not defiled and not immaculate, not deficient. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there's no form, no feeling, no recognition, no volition, no consciousness. No I, no. And keep in mind, it doesn't mean they're non-existent. It means they're not independently existent. There's no independent I. The I is dependent on the eye sense organ. It's dependent on the act of seeing. It's all independent. No ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visible form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no tangible, no mental object, no I element, etc., up to no mind element, no mental consciousness element. No ignorance and no extinction of ignorance, etc., up to no aging. Likewise, up to no aging and death. Likewise, there is no suffering, origin of suffering, cessation of suffering, or the path leading to the cessation, the Four Noble Truths. No wisdom, knowledge, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because there's no attainment, Bodhisattvas abide, relying on the perfection of wisdom, without obscuration of thought, and so are unafraid. Transcending perverted views, they attain in the end, nirvana. All beings existing in the three times, relying on the perfection of wisdom, all fully awakened to the highest perfect. So this is that important that I said, there's no attainment and no non-attainment. And when the Bodhisattva realizes there's no attainment, then they overcome all fear. The eight worldly dharmas, loss, gain, pleasure, pain. We want gain and we want to attain gain. In this case, we want to attain enlightenment. But when we realize that there's no enlightenment to attain, there's no attainment or non-attainment, at that point, the Bodhisattva overcomes all fear. So it's a very, very high level upon realizing shunyata at the point where we also overcome fears. Fears are always going to be there because they're connected with the worldly dharmas, aren't they? Therefore, one should know that the mantra of the Prajnaparamita is the mantra of great knowledge, highest mantra, unequaled mantra, the mantra which allays all suffering, the truth which has nothing wrong. The mantra of the Prajnaparamita is proclaimed. Tayata, gate gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. Gate gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. Gate gate, paragate, bodhisvaha. In this way, Shariputra, should a Bodhisattva and a Mahasattva train in the profound perfection on wisdom. Then the Lord rose from that concentration and commended the noble Lord Avalokita, the Bodhisattva and Mahasattva, saying, well done, O son of a good family. Well it is, O son of a good family. So it is. Just like that, just as you have taught, should the profound perfection of wisdom be practiced. And as the Lord uttered this, the elder Shariputra, the noble Lord Avalokita, the Bodhisattva and Mahasattva, and all the people present, including the Devas, human beings, Asuras, and Gandharvas, were applauded, were delighted and applauded the Lord's speech. Thus completes. Yeah, okay. The Heart Sutra, emptiness. I hope something's making sense about that. Now I hate to disappoint anybody. We're not going to jump right into tantric practices in this session. There still needs to be, we have clear understanding of shunyata. We have the motivation, altruistic wish to enlighten for all beings. We are merged from samsara. We have the wish. At least we have the wish or the intention of these things to try them on. So, and yesterday I was really uncomfortable. Things got caught up. It was my fault. I didn't realize things were ending so quickly and so abruptly because there was another course going on and he had to get up there for the beginning of that course. So I want to come out of today where we're really comfortable with all the topics and with lots of question answers. Keep your questions in mind. We'll spend more time at the end to do them, and they can be from the whole range of things that we've had. So we're going to go back up we're going to back up a little bit because it's so important, is the kleshas, we did the glaciers. The first is ignorance. Now we're going to go that again and again and again. It's the ignorance of not knowing the nature of reality. It's not. It's the ignorance of. Oh, excuse me. It's not the ignorance of misknowing. It's the ignorance of not knowing. It's the ignorance of misknowing reality. Sometimes they'll use the word duality. We see duality. There's a duality between the way things exist and they're rising, empty of findability, and the way we perceive them, which is concrete, self-existent. That's the duality. There's a between the way things are and the way we perceive things. That's the problem. Everything that appears to us, it appears as if it's concrete, self-existent from its own side. And that comes in the problem. If something appears, then it appears as if it's self-existent. And then going back to the Heart Sutra, the feeling comes in, I want the good, I don't want the bad. Something appears as if it's self-existent, then it feels as if it's self-existent, good or bad. We want the good, we don't want the bad. Well, see how that works? So right there's an important point. First, if we can uproot the ignorance so things don't appear at all as being self-existent, then we're free. Then we attain the path, and hopefully we've generated bodhicitta before that happens. We don't slide into the arhat, acquiescent state. Sometimes it's described as, although it's a great state to attain. And so we have to keep hammering this again and again and again. When it gets confusing, Lama Yeshe, he used to just say, just everything that appears, just remember nothing exists the way it appears. Nothing exists the way it appears. It appears as if it's concrete from its own side. That's not the way it exists. Until you worked out the philosophies and you deeper and deeper, you can see that this is kind of where we're taking a snake for the rope and we're misperceiving things because we're seeing them intrinsic. And don't get too upset about if we see things as intrinsically existent, because a bodhisattva who's free from samsara, they've already realized emptiness, they're free, but things still appear. They still appear as if they existed from their own side. Can you imagine? But they don't buy into it anymore. They know they don't buy into the trick. There's kind of a metaphor for that. There's the illusionist. They talk about a lot about illusionists. So the illusionist can make a cobra snake appear, say a snake. And the audience becomes afraid, right? Because, it's a cobra snake. But the illusionist is creating it somehow. But the illusionist isn't afraid. He's like the one he's realized. He's realized emptiness. He sees that there's nothing to be afraid of. He knows it's illusion-like. But the audience thinks it's real and they're afraid. So he's the one who's realized that. So that's the difference, guys. It's a good example, actually. That it's a traditional one. And it's only a fully awakened Buddha that can see those two truths at the same time. They can see the appearance and the true depth. See things in emptiness and appearance are become unified. When we get into Tantra, there's a level where you can do that before being a Buddha. You can see things as empty and their appearance at the same time. It's one of the unique factors of Tantra. Don't get me to explain that right off the top. But anyway, so the imprint, because even the one who's realized shunyata, they're free, but because of past imprints, still things appear that way. No longer do they buy it. Do you understand that? It's like things appear and they know this is just a bubble. It's a movie. It's illusion-like. They know it's very important. All these different ways, with philosophy, with the syllogism, everything that exists is dependent arising. Therefore, there's no intrinsic findability. Everything is empty of having intrinsic findability because it's a dependent arising. Syllogism going both ways. We make ourselves familiar with it, but realizing it is a big step. It's a step. It's a step of awakening. First step of awakening. And meanwhile, things are going to appear, and we're going to see them as desirable or undesirable. They're going to appear from their own side, ignorance. This is the cause of suffering. And we're going to see them as desirable or undesirable, indifferent. Forget indifferent for now. Just desirable or indifferent. Desirable and desirable. So anyway, and then we're going to want the desirable and not want the other. And so it's that's how we go around. That's what creates. That's how samsara is created. The cause of suffering is there. That point. So working with disturbing emotions, attachment is very, very, very important. Remember, we went through some yesterday's. Attachment disturbs our mind. We didn't go through all of them. It makes our mind unclear. Our moods go up and down. If someone we are attached to is depressed, then we can become depressed. It's like drinking salt water. No matter how much we have, we always want more and more and more. And it gives rise to all the other emotions. Anger. If we don't get what we're attached to, we get angry. Jealousy, fear, worry. All those things comes. Problem in relationships. All of the different things come from attachment. Attachment's the problem. As I've said many times, drugs, sex, and rock and roll are not the problem. It's attachment to them. Anything's not a problem. It's our attachment to them. Things in themselves are just rising and falling. But attachment is the delusion. That's where the problem comes. What would it be like to be not attached? What would it be like? I had a good, well, this is a story, but it's a story that I know it was told. I believe the Dalai Lama is not attached, right? I'm going to say that right off. And how do we get a proof of that? How do we get a proof? One of my favorite examples and favorite stories, in Australia many, many years ago, there was a tree planting ceremony. And His Holiness, he digs the first furrow, and then they get it ready, and he's going to put this tree. It's about 5 feet tall. It's kind of skinny at that point, and he's about to put the tree into the hole, and it's like the most joyous ceremony. It's like everybody's happy, laughing, having a good time. His Holiness is laughing. He's having a wonderful time. But he's not attached to it. And what happened? And I heard this from the man who was in charge of security. Someone jumped out of the crowd, and they took the tree out of His Holiness's hand and broke the tree and said, "Religion is dead." And His Holiness went, "That's another opinion." And everybody who was watching wanted to kill this guy. He took away our good time. How could anybody do this? Well. That proves, that's just incredible. He was enjoying, in fact, you can enjoy more, they say, more enjoy when you're less attached, because you're less worried about losing it all the time. And so he was maybe the laughing, most joyous person you ever met. But when that got taken away, okay, that's another opinion. Can you imagine being that cool? Lama Zopa Rinpoche, one of my teachers, he likes food. He loves to eat food. He came and stayed with me 5 years. He eats delicious. He's really into it, but he's not attached to it. So very commonly, when he's on business class or first class, whatever, on the plane, and if any of you knew Lama Zopa, he prays for about a half an hour before he eats. At least 20 minutes, and he thinks about where everything came from, who are the beings that died, and all the beings that helped bring this food to my plate. And he prays for all of them. It's a long process before he starts. So it's very common that he's on the plane, and his attendant told me, and he's doing all these prayers, and his eyes are closed, and he's doing it all, and just about he's ready, done a half an hour prayer. The stewardess comes along and says, "Well, Mr. Zopa is not hungry," so she takes the tray, and he opens his eyes, and his meal's gone, and he just laughs. Maybe it's easier on first class because he knows he can get it again. I don't know. But it's another example. If somebody takes the food out from under us, we flip. So it's good to know that it's good. We can laugh more and enjoy more. They say even all the pleasures, you can enjoy them more when you're less attached to them. You don't cease having enjoyment anymore. You don't. You're just not grasping of them. You're just enjoying them. That's far from our experience, but it's good to hear that can happen. And we can experience that to some degree. We know when our attachments lessen. What was the was we were talking? Was it Stephanie? Stephanie's from New York. I had a dream, and it seems related to that. It was like less buying into the appearance of things, wasn't it? After the dream. She's asking, is there a sign? Is that a healthy sign? Yes, it's a healthy sign. We can know that we're making progress and becoming less attached, more loving and sharing, etc., by the fact that how we react to situations, our little situations. Maybe we're not ready to have a tree taken out of our hands, but we're more spacious all the time. And non-attachment, we have to be careful because it doesn't mean indifference. Of like these four the four measurable thoughts. One of them is equanimity. We're free from attachment and aversion, greed and hatred. But the false friend of that is indifference. That's not detachment. That's a whole other level. You're not engaged. So okay, we're going to move on now. We're going to figure out the limited time. Now we're going to get it right up to where we're going to start Tantra tomorrow. But I wanted to go back through some of that. And actually, the way we can do things today, if we do it gradually, we'll keep your questions very clear. Because we're going to have more time to go through them. And that includes anything we've learned up till now. So I'm going to go through the Lam Rim prayer. We went through to a point. And so we've gone through the Lam Rim prayer up to the lower scope. And then we get the middle scope, which the Four Noble Truths is the middle scope. The first ones is just working for happiness of future lives. The middle scope is wanting to be free altogether. So we're developing the wish for liberation. Frantically tossed by waves of defilements and karma, tormented by the many sea monsters of the three sufferings, from this dread, boundless, great ocean of becoming, let a strong freedom grow in me, inspire me thus. They use the word in the traditional sense of becoming. I guess that's like when Lord Buddha, no, he's not Buddha yet, when he looked back and saw all of his past lives, rising and falling, going into each life, getting involved with all of the dramas of that life, again and again and again. That's becoming. Birth after birth after birth. This samsara, like an unbearable prison, I see as a charming garden. Rejecting this view, let me cleave the three trainings, the store of the Arya's treasures, and grasp liberation's banner. Inspire me thus. The Dalai Lama, he goes a little bit easy with this. He knows, we can't just completely be detached. He always says, they say working for this life's happiness is actually not so positive. But the minimum of dharma is working for next life's happiness, or being free completely, or liberated. All those. But sometimes he'll say, oh, I always say 50-50, we're going to work a little bit for this life's happiness because, we're not that liberated yet. We're not detached from what we're doing. So it's going to happen that way. One of the greatest yogis I ever met, he was like this, he was singing chapter Song Rinpoche. His tuku, most of the tukus I don't have so much faith in, but his young tuku was amazing. But the Song Rinpoche was one of these lamas he wasn't awakened who was. He knew all the scripture, but he was a great tantric yogi, Ruka practitioner. But he was like a Dhamma, not 1 second for anything, samsara. He didn't for 1 second see this as a beautiful park. And the first time he came to America, they're in the car, and people are playing tennis. And he asked the translator, what are they doing? What are those people doing? And the translator explained, he goes, Dharma does not flourish in this country. That's how serious he was. Like, if anybody would waste their time doing ding dong, and of course, that's an extreme. We have to take it slower. It's not saying you should never practice tennis, etc., recreation. But that's someone who's just about 1 second would he mess around with anything other than Dharma. And, we can't expect to meet that standard. And later, even Song Rinpoche, she started to understand the Western culture better in order to communicate with us. Later on, we were in Barcelona, we were sitting in a teaching with him, and he said, I'm the stupid one in the room here because I don't know your culture. You know? And then he said, the translator, he's half stupid. And you're the ones who know your culture. So he got it, that there's a gap because of cultural understanding. It's not like Tibetans don't have their recreation, but he probably doesn't think their dharma is flourishing when they're playing mahjong or whatever they're doing. Jungle either. So anyway, that's going back to that, and I want to. So we'll just keep going through this, and thinking how these tormented beings are my mothers who cared for me kindly again and again, let me develop the unfeigned compassion like a fond mother for a dear child. At this point, we said we want to get free from samsara altogether. But this is where the Mahayana starts coming in. It's still the middle scope. And it's like, what about all the other beings? If I get enlightened, what about all the beings which I have relationship with? I have total relationship with every other being on the planet, everything, every creature. What about them? If I'm going to get free, well, then we should do. That's where we started to get for the bodhicitta, generating the bodhicitta. Now I have to be careful not getting too caught up because here we are at Tonglen and the ways of developing bodhicitta. If you weren't here for the Tonglen retreat, it's the peak. It's the peak of the Mahayana Sutra training. It's the Tonglen practice. So we're going to have to go into it again. Maybe I won't be able to tell quite all the stories with it, but so now we move into the. The bodhicitta, generating compassion. Okay, we've already done it. Think of all these beings have been my mother. So, training the mind of exchange self and others with a 7-point mind training. This is the profound teaching. One of the most profound texts, most town practices from which the Tonglen practice come, it's called the 7-point mind training. And you can find maybe 15 more commentaries on it from all of the lamas, great lamas of all the schools. 7-point mind training, Geshe Chekwa. It's coming from the Kadampa lineage, not the new Kadampa, not this new group. But anyway, Atisha came to Tibet and he was absolutely pure, renounced being. And his followers were, it became the Kadampa tradition. This is Geshe Chekwa was the one who wrote this. It could have been from Atisha. There's also these mind trainings from Atisha directly. He came in about 1000 BC. He came to Tibet, and when he came to Tibet, it was he brought the new translations. It had gone completely degenerate, and he came, the whole story with Atisha, which I'll lose everything if I don't start telling the story of Atisha. But anyway, he came, he met in Bodh Gaya. Tara told him it'd be good to go to Tibet, and your life will be shortened, but it'd be very beneficial. So he went, and he was very pure. When he came to Tibet, Sutra and Tantra were almost two different. They're almost two different religions. This name of this course is Mahayana Buddhism, Tantra. They become almost separate religions because people thought, I'm a tantric practitioner. No. Tantra is Mahayana. It's part of the Mahayana. It's divided into two. There's the Sutra and the Tantra. We'll come to that when we go through. At the end of today and starting on the Tantra section. So, meditation. As no one desires the slightest suffering, nor ever has enough of happiness. There's no difference between myself or others. So let me be glad when they're happy. And then exchange self from others. This chronic disease of cherishing oneself is the cause of unwanted suffering. Seeing this, let me lay blame on it and begrudge it and destroy the great demon of self-grasping. Inspire me thus. So very, very important. What keeps us in samsara, the middle scope, is we haven't realized shunyata. Then we think there's this intrinsically existent I, me. Intrinsic. We haven't realized the emptiness of I yet. We haven't realized that we are dependent arising. And so we say at that point, what keeps us in samsara is rangzing, the self-grasping. It's this I which never existed. There's an I that exists, a relative conventional I, and there's one that doesn't. That's the one that's so concrete, and if something happens and it comes up very strongly, he said that to me, and we grasp it, this thing comes out. And if you could ever slow down and analyze that when it comes, you'd see it never. But that's what we're working to overcome in the middle scope. But on top of that, by grasping at it, when we go into the Mahayana, we cherish that I. It's about cherishing it. We want what I want, what I want, what I want, what I want, as opposed to others, cherishing self instead of others. So this is seeing the disadvantages of self, of cherishing self instead of cherishing others. Because cherishing others, we need to have compassion, and we need to go into bodhicitta. That's what this is all about. So let me lay the blame. The great demon, if there's a demon or a devil, it's self-cherishing, selfishness. And His Holiness will even turn that into a thing. He'll go, if you really want to be selfish, be wisely selfish and cherish others. And then you get all the happiness anyway. You know? Be skillful about it. That's the trick, you know. Instead of me, which just causes you to have, self-cherishing mind. Nobody wants to be around us anymore. We only think about ourselves, me, my problem, No, cherish others. The next one is cherishing others. I'll try to briefly give this story, but I can't get into the story too well. We don't have much time. I met a couple of people in my life who weren't lamas, and they cherished others every minute. They transformed the world around. One of them was in France. He was a monk. He came to the monastery, and he became a monk. And he really lived that. Absolutely, every animal, every insect, he cherished more than himself. And wow, wherever he was, people were coming all over from France to have his darshan, to sit with him, because he listened. He could heal people because of his kindness, because he cared more about them than he cared about himself. And that really brought people into his realm, so to speak. And he was the most simple guy, And now he gives courses. He does. And there was another person, real people, not stories from Tibet, people who, by eliminating the self-cherishing or uprooted it, transformed. We run into some of these saints, look like Mother Teresa. She just worked for others. She wasn't thinking about her own comfort. She worked for others. And she's happy. One, she was happy. Charles was happy. And also, everybody else likes them. They're not isolating themselves. It's really, really important. It goes exactly against the way we normally think. And then comes the Tonglen practice, the Tonglen, which is the peak. Which is the peak of the practices of the Mahayana to generate bodhicitta. So read the verse. Therefore, worshipful and compassionate gurus, let all the karmic obscurations and suffering of mother migrators ripen on me now, and let me give others my happiness and good deeds, so all sentient beings have happiness. Inspire me thus. Inspire me thus. So, this sounds crazy, doesn't it? It sounds really crazy. I'm going to take, and the way you do the practice is that there's a couple of ways, but this self-cherishing, the root of all of our problems, you visualize it like a lump of coal next to your heart, this lump, self-cherishing, and it's where you feel your selfishness. If somebody attacks you, me, I feel it there, and that I, boom, it never existed. You feed it constantly. So you take on the suffering of other beings. You take it all on, and you visualize it as like everything bad, toxic, polluted, black smoke. You breathe it in. That's the opposite of what we want to do, and you give it to the self-cherishing mind, and the self-cherishing mind, from smithereens. And then you realize that what we have is infinite to give. We have Buddha nature. Our fundamental nature is clear and pure. The more we can take on, the more we have to give. It's axiomatic. Yeah. Well, briefly, I can say when I first this worked for me. I went to Kopan courses in the 70, 74, 75, 76, 79 Kopan courses. Lama Zopa Rinpoche would teach this, and it'd be like, now take on all the suffering of all the beings of the hell realms. Imagine all of it, bringing it in terms of black, horrible, giving it to yourself. And it didn't quite work for me. I mean, it worked. I got some benefit, and then I take all of the suffering of all the beings in the ghost realms, which were, and then take on all the suffering of all the beings in the human realm. And I believe in hell realms and ghost realms. I don't have a problem with that. They're states of mind, but they're very real when we're in them. And Lama Zopa had been teaching for, my first 3 weeks at Kopan. He's teaching hell realms, and Tisha came from Tibet with his swimming pool, his mansion. It was like sweet worldly dharmas. That's all we were getting the first 3 weeks. So, and it didn't quite work for me. And then when my life fell apart at one point, I had a separation. Somebody left me, that person I was most loving, most attached with. I had an anxiety attack in the bazaar here. I had an anxiety attack in the bazaar, and I was like, this story. And I used to tell myself, Jimmy, you're a Dharma practitioner. What are you doing? You have all these methods to practice. Why are you wallowing in your own core self-pity suffering? So, and I would try things, but I couldn't calm the mind. You can clear the story from your head, but you still feel it viscerally in the loom, the prana moves around. You feel all the emotions, not just as thoughts, but all this, and anyway, so it didn't work very well. And then I had this, it hit me. Well, it hit me. I was in the bazaar having an anxiety attack. And I thought, think of all the beings that are feeling exactly what I'm feeling. Instead of taking all the suffering of the hell realms, I thought of all the brothers and sisters out there whose baby had left them, who were suffering, they were feeling sad and blue, horrible, horrible, horrible. And I could perfectly visualize them because I was feeling that. And also it's very easy because every song, every poem, everything, every movie's about that. My baby left me suffering, wah, wah, wah. And so I imagine taking in all the brothers and sisters, and there's all the music and the blues, everything that helped make that come very real to me. And I breathed it in, and it worked. It dissolved this. Well, I always teach it because I don't have any realizations, but when things fell apart, that practice worked. Taking on all the suffering, the other beings, and I knew exactly what I was doing because I'm feeling it, I'm taking it theirs. And then it would dissolve, and I'd send back light to all of them. Not only did it work, but often when we're going through some horrible experience in life where we're left or things are horrible, we feel we're the only one. We feel lonely that we're going through this. So it also eliminated that. I've taken on all the suffering of all these beings, all these brothers and sisters out there. I'm perfectly interconnected with them. The Lonely Hearts band, whatever, It really, really worked, this Tonglen practice. And so it's very, very powerful. Very, very. It's the peak of the sutra path for eliminating self-cherishing. But one would spend a lot of time with it, thinking about the self-cherishing mind, setting it up. But when you do it, you don't do this with every breath. Like, no, you set it up. You got this lump of coal, and also if it happens to be a broken heart from separation, you don't have to visualize the black lump of coal. You're carrying around this lump all the time anyway. In your throat between here and here. Sad and blue, you feel it. And you dissolve that feeling. That light. It really works. But you don't do it with every breath. You set the whole thing up again and then breathe it in again. Like that. We can try it once for a couple of minutes. But if you can't, I recommend not doing it and finding some way that you're feeling bad about something and take on the suffering of others. Often loneliness or confusion. If you're feeling confused about something, think of all the other beings you're probably feeling confused. Think if you're upset about the whole political situation, whatever's going bad, you take on all the other beings' suffering, and give them back light. But one common one is loneliness. We feel lonely sometimes. We feel alone, isolated. And so it's an easy one to bring up. You remember when you felt lonely and like, I'm the only one, I'm suffering here. You know you're not logically, but you feel it. You feel very much isolated in the room. That's a good one, but you can choose whatever you want. So we set it up. So you imagine all of this self-cherishing, the cause of all of our problems. The self-cherishing, we're cherishing an I that never existed. Not the relative I that's going here or there, the one that we've exaggerated, the one that we have to see as empty. Now we've been cherishing that, and we want to, self-cherishing, we want to absorb it. You pick whatever object you want to do that with, and breathe it in. And it comes down, it enters, you think it's just very illogical, bringing in a illusion. All the other practices, we breathe in the white light and breathe out the black. This one we've got reversed it. We're doing it the Bodhisattva way, radical compassion. It's radical because it's going against the self-cherishing. Radical action is to breathe in all this black stuff. And we imagine that this black lump is dissolved into smithereens, all dust into space. It's gone. Underneath that self-cherishing, underneath that lonely feeling, underneath that lump of self is spaciousness. Our true nature. Our true nature is pure from the beginning. It's completely unobscured. We have that mind. When we get to the Tantra, that's what it's kind of the focus, the clear light mind. But we all have it. And so we just think of all the happiness, all the happy things that we've ever experienced, all the sitting by a fire when we're cold, the whole spectrum of happy little moments we can get back. Brothers and sisters, breathe it back. And ironically, it's like somehow it works that the more we take on, which seems so crazy from the first breath, the more we have to give back. Because we have a bottomless store of goodness. We're just always caught up in our selfishness. We have infinite goodness, not infinite goodness. Bottomless goodness. We have a clear light mind that's never going to stay. So do a couple more breaths with that and see how it goes. Okay, don't have to stop right now. Finish the cycle. Go ahead and finish the breath you're on, and then after 30 seconds, a minute, then we'll start. Okay, so now I want to, with respect to that, are there any questions with respect to that practice? Then I'll go through the rest of the path, boom, 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 the different points, and mention some things, and we'll still have a half hour for question and answer for other questions. Is there anything that comes up with relation to the Tonglen practice at this point? Or what are the stages that brought us up to that stage? The self-cherishing mind, the devil, the demon, the main problem, whatever it is, the practice. Is there anything? Okay. So then we can just continue with reading these going to the Lam Rim prayer. Also, the Lam Rim prayer is actually, we're doing that as the path. So in respect to the Four Noble Truths, if we uproot, we see that the truths on the afflicted side, that the causes of suffering are kleshas, which many translations, disturbing emotions, disturbing attitudes, delusions, karma and klesha are the cause. And the root cause is the misknowing of reality. So when we get to the third noble truth, basically what that means is the stains that are occasional, not mixed with the fundamental purity of our mind. Negative qualities don't have a valid foundation. We can balance our minds. We can do it. And we can understand that our fundamental nature is pure. Clarity. I'm going to read the first, this is from the Lama Yeshe's introduction to Tantra. And it'll come again tomorrow because that opens with this basically. No matter how confused or deluded we may be, the underlying and essential nature of our being is clear and pure. Like clouds in the sky don't damage the light-giving power of the sun. And the ultimate purpose of all spiritual practice, whether they are called Buddhist or not, is to uncover and make contact with this purity, compassion, love, compassion and love. But if we have not contacted these qualities within ourselves, we will see everything as ugly and limited. For whatever we see every day is actually nothing more than a projection of our own inner reality. According to Dharma view, the ultimate goal of our human evolution is enlightenment. Is this third truth, the cessation of suffering, the true cessation? There's not much to say about it. You realize shunyata, and then the cessation takes place. And then it's the path leading to the cessation. And for that, in this context, we're using the Lam Rim as the path. So in the central part of the Lam Rim, it was the Four Noble Truths, the 12 links. And so we're going now into the Mahayana. And we've just done the Tonglen practice, which is kind of pinnacle of Mahayana. And then we go through the other stages of the 7-point mind training. Though the world and its beings are full of the fruits of evil and undesired sufferings pour down upon me like rain, let me see there a chance to use up the fruits of bad karma and make bad conditions a path. Inspire me thus. So, the one thing I realized when I said this experience happened with the Tonglen actually working, and it didn't work the way Rinpoche was leading it before. And Rinpoche was always saying we should pray for problems, more problems, pray for problems. And I go, excuse me, Rinpoche. I've got plenty of problems. Let me kind of little by little work through this. I mean, Buddha took 3 countless eons. Why can't I just kind of do it gradually instead of trying to knock it out with Tonglen? And so when it really worked, I realized that's exactly what Rinpoche is talking about, taking on the suffering of others, taking on because we understand it. When we understand the Four Noble Truths, this prayer we make, may all beings be free of suffering and its cause, we understand that the cause is karma and klesha. And when we take it on, we understand the process ourselves. So that prayer has a lot more meaning. A lot more meaning. compassion. We understand we can generate compassion. Not pity, which is a false friend, but compassion. So the more understanding you get, the more I have. And then it hit me like, wow, all that time I'm hearing, in fact, the 7-point mind training book of Lama Zopa, there's 15 translations, one has it. It's like, pray for problems, pray for problems, pray for problems. But yeah, it never came to me. I was going on about that. And I just said, okay, I'll gradually follow this path. I will aspire to that but, later. Meanwhile, let's just quiet the mind a little bit and see how we do things. So that hit me very strongly. Whatever comes up, good or bad, by the 5 forces, the whole Dharma. So anyway, let me make it a path. That means we can take on whatever comes up, where we have the power to transform. I'm not going to explain the whole 5 forces right now. These are certain things that you know already, but basically by practicing the path, motivation, dedication, etc. White seed accumulation, etc. And let me make the path to develop let me make it a path to develop the 2 bodhicittas and entertain only a happy mind. Inspire me thus. With the skillful means of having the 4 applications, let me join what I meet with meditation at once. And by the practice of the mind training, pledges and precepts, make worthwhile this opportune rebirth. With the technique of mounting upon the breath, giving and taking, by friendliness, compassion, and superior intention, let me free, through superior intention, to free beings from the great ocean of becoming. Let me master true bodhicitta. Inspire me thus. The way this is set up, each one of these prayers, this is like a glance meditation in the Lama Rim. This comes in the back of the Lama Chopa. You're going through the whole Lama Rim. And above the crown of your head is the miller tree of the Lama Chopa. If we're practicing Chenrezig, we imagine Avatara, we imagine Tara there. And at each step, we say, inspire me thus. We read the prayer and we ask Tara to remove all obstacles to being able to realize that particular point. That's why I like this translation. I don't use the ones in the FPM prayer book, because in Tibetan, after each verse, it says, Jimi, bless me thus, inspire me thus. It's not caught in the middle. The idea is that the refuge field is there, whatever it is, in this case, the Lama Chopa refuge here, prayer, which is Lama Losam Tubo and Dorji Chang, the Lama, the aspect of Tsongkhapa, and the aspect of Dorji Chang, etc. Lama Losam Tubo and Dorji Chang. So that's what's up there. And in each practice we do, that yidam or that deity would be up there, and we're asking it, Tara, please inspire me to be able to realize that verse of the Lama. And it comes much more easily when we ask help for it like that. And then we visualize light pouring down and removing that obstacle, moving the obstacle to making that realization. Now it becomes incredible practice. Learning with the light of Tara coming down, everything we're supposed to learn, and eliminating all obstacles to us learning that. Think about that. Incredible stuff. We can do it. It's all within our realm of possibility. With the one path, all of the Buddhas of the 3 times tread, the pure Bodhisattva vows, let me bind my mind stream and strive with the will in the practice of the 3 moralities of the great vehicle. Inspire me thus. So we've generated bodhicitta. This is the whole thing. With the Tonglen practice, we've generated bodhicitta. Boom. And this is the prayer when we've generated it, With this technique, by friendliness, compassion, and superior intention, to free beings from the great ocean of suffering, let me master true bodhicitta. Inspire me thus. Let me master this. And then it goes into the 6 perfections. The first is the perfection of giving. Then once we've generated the bodhisattva power, all our activity is bodhisattva activity, the perfection of giving. It's not just giving, but it's the perfection of giving. The perfection of wisdom, the perfection of morality. We'll go through those quick. To the perfection of giving. My body and wealth and my virtues of the three times. Let me change into the things each being desires. And by the advice of augmenting detached generosity, complete the perfection of giving. Inspire me thus. There's different levels of giving. There's the giving of material. There's giving of food. There's giving of fearlessness, helping people when they're afraid, and the giving of dharma. Many levels of giving. And there's ways, all of this stuff, for lack of a better word that I don't like, attaining merit, practicing more and more and more and more of the practices, getting the spiritual momentum to where we can really get the realization really. And so we're practicing overcoming the delusions, and we're giving. Giving is one of them. Giving. But on the other hand, there's ways of giving that are skillful. There's ways of giving that make it infinitely more meritorious and open. One of them is there's this great bodhisattva. There's 8 great bodhisattvas. Of course, Avalokiteshvara and Manjushri. Well, one of them is Samantabhadra. Samantabhadra taught us the way to give. If you ever read The King of Prayers, he just expands everything. It's mind expanding experience you could have. So, according to Samantabhadra, I'll give you an example. You're going to give a morsel of food to someone, a morsel of food to a beggar. And then that's a good thing. That's a positive action, as long as you don't try to do it to show off, whatever. And then when you give that morsel of food to a baker, you imagine in your imagination that you're feeding all of the beings in the universe, multiverses. By expanding through your creative imagination, you're feeding all of the beings. And that's the imprint that goes on your mind stream, feeding all beings. It's mind-blowing, Samantabhadra's way. Lama Zopa, he just exemplified everything he does. Well, let's go make some merit, and everything he does, And he multiplies. May all beings be fed by this. May all beings be fed by this. Every action he does, and that's the imprint. It's a positive imprint to give someone bread or some food. It's a positive imprint. But the imprint of feeding all beings, you give the food, and that's the way. It's amazing. Every practice you do with that giving. And the other way is doing it all in emptiness. It's called the circle of the 3. If you're giving something to someone, you realize that the object, the person I'm giving to, myself, the giver, and the action of giving are interdependent, meaning they're empty of being independent. There's no independent giving. There's no independent receiver. There's no independent giver. Can you see that? You put the whole thing as a dependent arising, and that also just multiplies everything unconceivably. This is where you get these great masters, just always practicing with every second. Instead of doing a little bit of goody-goody stuff, they just multiply it. They imagine everything they're doing is for all beings. And it's simple. It's free. It's free. You can feed one person and imagine feeding everybody. And your mind is always feeding everybody. It's just incredible how simple and profound these practices are. And they can be applied to any one of these parameters, etc. Yeah. And that's how somebody practices like that. You're offering water bowls, you imagine you're offering countless water bowls. But that circle of the 3 makes it happen with emptiness. Immediately, the object, the subject, and the action are empty, not being independent because they're dependent on each other. In your action, you're meditating on emptiness, you're meditating dependent arising with every action you do. It's possible. It's not that complicated. You don't have to study philosophy to do it. And we'll get in when you get to the Tantras, we realize that we can rise as the deity and reabsorb. Their fullest potential is mind-boggling that we can play with now. We can start acting out now. So then the other perfections. The perfection of morality. By not leaving the bounds of the vows, prati moksha bodhisattva mantra, even for my life, collecting good qualities, working for beings, let me complete the perfection of conduct inspired me thus. The vows are something quite special. You can do a positive action, or you can avoid doing a negative action. But when you vow to do that, somehow it makes it greater. I guess you've made it stronger commitment. And likewise, if you're in the vows that you will do this, when you neglect, it makes it a little more negative. So vows are quite mind-blowing. They're quite liberating. We think of them as binding. Because when we take a vow that we're not going to do something that's negative, and then we come to a circumstance where should I do this or not do this? You've already made the decision. I've already made the vow. And you'll fall. Sometimes you'll break vows. They say, what would be the point of having vows if we were so perfect that we're never going to break them? You know, it's not realistic. It's not that tight. You know? So what it means is that we make a decision ahead of time that I'm going to do this and not do this. And so we don't have to get into moral equivocation over everything that comes up. It's done. No getting fussed about it. So they're liberating in that sense. And we do our best with them. We take vows to the degree that we can. If there are things that we know we're going to break again and again and again, then it's better to not do it for a day. It's like quitting smoking. I'm not going to smoke today. You know, I'm never going to do it again. But, you know, because then you lose some of the power of your mind when you do it. You know, I'm not going to eat this today. I'm going to take it, whatever it's going to do. So it's better to be realistic. For that day, I can do it. And we can build it up more and more and more. But every time we fall back, that's if we take a vow. So it's better not to vow something that we know we're going to do. So the perfection of patience. Through all the 9 types of the 3 realms beings get angry, abuse, upbraid, threaten, and even kill me. Let me undisturbed in return for their harm try to help them and complete the perfection of patience inspiring me. Oh, the perfection of patience is amazing. The Bodhisattva Chari Avatara. Maybe some of you have heard of it. It's the greatest book on becoming a Bodhisattva by Shanti. The practice of patience and tolerance in that is all of Buddhist literature. It's the one, how to cultivate tolerance. Because if you're tolerant, with the way it works with the afflictions, as we've said, if you have patience in your mind, anger and a negative emotion cannot come up when there's a positive one there. Patience is when we can develop. And there's ways of doing it. There's ways of understanding things that allow it to happen. One of the many examples which you've probably heard, because it comes up from the patience chapter of the Bodhisattva Chari Avatara, if it's someone comes to you with a stick and they're going to hit you with the stick, you get angry with the stick? No, you don't get angry with the stick. You get angry with the person who's wielding the stick, don't we? But in the same way, when we understand anger, we understand that that person is being wielded by their anger just like they're wielding the stick. They're completely being thrown about by their delusions. And so don't expect anything coming from someone when they're run by anger. Just be patient with it. Don't take it personally. Be patient. It's incredible how it can be developed. Examples like that. There's lots of examples just in that one chapter of how to develop patience. We need it all the time, don't we? You know, little things that come up in our life. Patience, tolerance. And then the complete energy, the perfection of energy, or virya. Actually, the best translations for that is enthusiastic perseverance. Even if I must stay in Avicii's fire, that's one of the worst hells. For an ocean of eons, for every sentient being, let me not tire of compassion, but strive for high bodhi, and complete the perfection of energy. Enthusiastic perseverance. It's not just perseverance, but it's enthusiastic. And basically, it's for Dharma. Enthusiastic perseverance for like these examples of going out on the footfield again and getting a shot so that you can go out and break your bones even more, getting out there to win this foot. But that is enthusiastic. It's always enthusiastic perseverance to be able to cultivate positive. Having the patience for cultivating positive. We want to lessen our patience for the negative stuff. And then the perfection of concentration, avoiding the false agitation, distraction, and fading. By concentration, one pointedly set on all dharmas, mode of existence, empty of truth. Let me complete the perfection of dhyana. Meditation inspired me thus. So what they're talking about there is it's very, cultivating concentration is something we've got to do it. Both in the Pali Sutras and both vehicles, Mahayana and the Pali Sutras, before you can have vipassana, which is insight into emptiness, you need to have shamatha. You need to quiet the mind. You need to tame the mind by gaining more and more one-pointed concentration. And probably some of you have done retreat. Basically, the deepest advice that one could give, I remember there's at the end of courses, you give advices of the way to do things. Not that I realized the thing, but when it comes to meditation, what's the advice? When the mind goes off the object, bring it back. When it goes off the object, bring it back. That's the advice. And what that means is when the mind goes off the object, don't go, oh no, don't whip yourself. Oh no, it went off again. Oh no, I don't have any stability. Bring it back without any psychological balance. Don't judge yourself. Off that. And gradually, we can lengthen the time and we can focus like that. So there's a whole way of developing concentration, and it's something we can do with every action. Also, the perfection of wisdom, with the distinguishing wisdom of reality linked with its induced tranquility and great bliss, let me by space-like yoga, absorbed on the ultimate, complete the perfection of wisdom. Now this is where you're going into meditation on the I that never existed, on myself, the one that never existed. And you try to bring up an image of when it came up. It only comes up when you're hit up with intense moments of emergency. You try to calmly, and you go into this. I haven't made this. This is the way you realize Shunyata. This is where you have the wisdom of reality that's linked with tranquility and great bliss, the subtlety of the mind and body. Space-like yoga, that's the space-like meditation. It's called we develop on looking for the I. You don't find it. It never ever existed. So you only find space. You bring up a clear vision of this I that we get so upset about, and then we realize it's not a reality. There's a conventional I, but this I never existed. So there's only space. Space-like. That's called the space-like meditation. And then when we come out of that, that's the one where you would realize emptiness. And then we come out of that, we have the illusion-like, realizing how all dharmas, outer or inner, like dreams, illusions, the moon's image in a clear lake, appear but do not exist truly. Let me complete the illusion-like concentration. Inspire me thus. So that's where we come out of that. We realize we haven't found this I that we've always pandering to and feeding. We only see this illusion-like appearance. We realize that they're just illusions. They're just illusion-like. You always got to say illusion-like. Yeah, the post-meditation period. In fact, we do that at some of these retreats. The reason I got ahead and wanted to jump right into this Tantra teaching for these 2 days is because I like to give these 10-day retreats where we do Chenrezig or Tara practice, and we do these deeper practices, even beyond our initiations and things like that. We do some of them. But we do it over 10 days, and then Introduction to Tantra is just taught as we practice. It comes up. So that things come up. We take an hour in the afternoon and talk about the Dharma as things come up. When we're engaged in practice, it goes so much deeper. Okay, so then perfection of wisdom. So training the mind in the middle view in particular. Samsara and peace have no atom of self-existence, dependent arising by cause and effect, not deceptive. Let me realize the point of the Nagarjuna's thought, that these two don't conflict, but harmonize. Inspire me thus. This is really important to get this eventually. You know, and we ask the question, if we're in the Dharma, if everything is empty, then how is How does cause and effect work? How does that work? How does it function? If there's no ultimate cause, no ultimate effect, etc., etc. If everything was empty, we think, or people think, nothing can function. And Nagarjuna just said, if things weren't empty, they couldn't function. They have to be empty before they can even exist. So he just turned it around like bam, boom. Because it takes emptiness dependent arising for something to function. That one you have to contemplate for a while. And then here we are, how to train the mind in the uncommon path of the Vajrayana, preparing oneself for the profound perfected Vajrayana. Then through my Vajrayana helmsman's kindness, let me across the deep center of Tantra's ocean. Keeping the purity of Tantric vows and pledges after preparation, let me hold my vows and pledges, the root of all siddhis, dearer than my life, inspire me thus. So, okay, that's where we are. We're up to 10 more minutes. We can have 10 minutes of questions, and he'll let us go over them because we're not so pressed. Any questions of what do we have now? And now we're up to the edge of entering into the Tantric path. Anything that we've done so far? Any questions? Any clarification?
I have a question, Jimmy.
Sure.
I wanted to know if you can explain the emptiness of emptiness itself.
Okay, that's a good question. What it means is that we start bantering around this. Emptiness means everything is empty of intrinsic findability. So everything is empty, right? But we start, when we're on about emptiness, emptiness, and emptiness, we've already reified emptiness into being something concrete. Well, emptiness must be true, So it's actually thinking that emptiness itself is intrinsically findable, because everything appears to us as being intrinsically findable, everything. But we realize that it's empty. And so emptiness itself, with that same ignorance, can also appear. And it's said to be the most dangerous one, to believe that emptiness is ultimately real. That's really following deep into the wrong view. It's as simple as that, but simple things are really not so simple when it comes to it. Everything that appears to us appears as if it's existent from its own side. So does emptiness when we talk about it, until we really realize it. When we really realize it, that is come up. But if we start believing in emptiness, emptiness dependent arising, this is real, nothing else is real, it becomes the same as like everything's illusion except God. I don't know if that makes any sense, because it's so ephemeral. It's like, we think about emptiness all the time.
I
We
know
think about it,
it
we
is.
see the word, and then we start thinking that it's got some reality to itself, but it's not. It is also empty.
It's like the Matrix, you can just keep going into
Yeah.
the emptiness of the emptiness of the emptiness, and like a loop.
Well, you don't have to do it. You only really have to get it once, because it's everything is empty. But as I said, we start getting into this path and we discuss it and we study emptiness. The more we study it, the more we invest our lives into this understanding, the more this thing emptiness becomes something concrete. Where emptiness is the mere and findable of intrinsic findability. It's just that. There's nothing more than that. It's not. We don't want to reify that as to being self-existent. We have to make sure that that isn't reified. No, you don't have to do it again. It's just one thing. You realize that everything's dependent arising, therefore it's empty of intrinsic findability. But don't apply
Right.
anything to it. Yeah. Okay, is there anything else? We got time for questions from yesterday, from the whole time we've been together, or even from some other things come up. We went through a lot of stuff. There must be some questions about it. The delusions, the afflictions, karma. That always brings up millions of questions. How does karma work?
Can I ask another question if we have time?
Sure.
So if we've never attained enlightenment, and the mind is the only way of knowing it, And if we don't know what it feels like, how do we know once we attain it?
I've heard that answered by great beings. They said, "Don't worry, you'll know. You'll get up and dance." You'll be no doubt that you realized it. There'll be no doubt at all. Bam. Underneath the tree of enlightenment in the story of the Buddha. Now, what's the last thing that happened? Siddhartha's looked back and seen these countless past lives. He's seen that, and then he's he's been reborn in other people, and then also how the Four Noble Truths works. And then just before he's realized his enlightenment, Mara appears in the form of all these temptations. First there are sexual temptations, and then armies, etc. And Mara's last question to throw the Buddha off, the newly awakened being off, how do you know you're empty? And the Buddha, he touched he had total confidence. He knew he'd realize. How do you know you're alive? This gesture of the Buddha with this, he touches this, it's called the earth touching movement, where he's touching the ground, and he says, earth is my witness. Gaia, the goddess of the earth, is my witness. I know I'm alive, no doubt about it. You'll know. For the first time, you'll be able, if you were on the Bodhisattva path, all the way up there, you'd be already have all the clairvoyances, you'd be doing all these things. But for the first time, you'd be able to see the emptiness of something and the thing functioning at the same time. Two truths at the same time. Double exposure is this one Japanese Buddhist philosopher. So you don't worry about it, you'll know. And that's why this great Lama answer. Don't worry, you know, you realize emptiness. You're gonna get up and dance. It's not gonna be, or in the case of Tilopa, the Tilopa Naropa, he slapped him with the shoe. He had one little thing he had to overcome. Wham! And then he just started to laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh. All of these dramas by thinking things of self-existent, all the pain, all the pleasure, all the grasping, is all just a bubble. It's nothing. It's just nothing. It's all empty. I mean, it's all functions, but we believed in it so concretely. He just started laughing, and they say that happens sometimes. I believed all this stuff was so true, all this stuff that was causing me anxiety and pain. It doesn't mean that you're nihilistic, you don't believe it. All the things function like that. There's examples of the moment the great things. Yeah, you don't worry, you'll get it. You'll be the fly in the sky, whatever. You can probably do that way better.
Yeah, it's just a matter of having trust in the Dharma as the correct way to.
Yes, but also not just having trust in it, but by the time you're moving up there, you're going to have realizations of it. You'll have realization at one point of concentration before you can even meditate, realize emptiness. At one point of concentration comes all of the clairvoyances, which you can see all your past lives, and you can see others' past lives, etc. That will already be there, little by little by little, all that hard work, and so you'll gain the confidence at every step along the way, and it's so important to have a guru. Especially in the Vajrayana, we'll start that tomorrow, where you have to have a guru there because you have to have initiation. Guru. You have to see the deity, the guru, and your own subtle mind is one entity. Anything else? This is the one day they're allowing us to go over. Yesterday I really wanted to go and we didn't have time for questions. And I kept going on. And today we kind of finished the path as well as we could possibly do it. The three principles. We all understand now that we want emptiness, renunciation of samsara, which means to emerge from samsara, the generation of bodhicitta, the altruistic wish, means every single being. We don't accept every single being. Okay. Strictly speaking, we've used up the time. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure, please. That's why it's so good to write them down along the way, even from yesterday, whatever. Is that I have everybody's pictures blurry here. So is this Paya? This is Payal answering this question? It's not. Who's asking this question?
Stephanie,
Okay,
do
Stephanie's
you hear
asking.
me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yes.
So you're asking it. But it came in
Okay,
wobbly.
great.
It was some connection problem and it sounded like a different voice than Stephanie. And I'm looking at the picture next, which is also blurry and wobbly, the one of Payal. And so, okay, Stephanie, go ahead. You can ask us. Don't be ashamed to ask us. It's
My
good to
connection.
ask. You take on the wonderful thing of us asking questions. When people are shy and they think later, great. Questions are wonderful. They make us wake up, make us think about the topic.
Okay.
Okay.
So I have a question. I have a question about the relationship with body and mind, and having the realizations, let's say, of emptiness to kind of shield, against or with the illusions, right? So I could have the realization and see and know, what the dependence is into what's happening around me before and in other lives or this life, to create like for the conditions that happen.
One of the things that's difficult
Now,
for me right
how
now
does
is everything
that
going wobbly?
to
Other
my
people hear this
body?
wobbly? It's going really wobble, 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 wobble. So I want to be clear about this because I'm going to have to go back and put this back together. Your question.
Somatization.
So as a relationship of body and mind, one thing that might help, it's just off the top, it might not, that emotions, disturbing emotions, they're not just taking place at the level of mind, they're taking place in the body. And we know this, don't we? We know this when we get fearful, we might have sweating, we might have hot and cold, our palms might get sweaty, because at the level, there's always, wherever there's mind, there's body, wherever there's body, there's mind. They're inseparable. They're totally different entities, but they work together, separate. The lung, especially when you get to the subtler mind, you have the consciousness, you have the wind on which that consciousness rides. They call it lung in Tibetan. Prana in Sanskrit. Chi or ki is like Tai Chi. And so when we feel an emotion, it's not just a mental structure, it's we feel it. We feel it, the disturbing winds. The things get tight, the chakras, all this stuff gets tight. I don't know if that'll help, but I'm not thinking that's just an answer, but it might put us into the realm of where we're dealing with both the mental and the tendon prana becoming unclear. But take me back to the question, because everything was warbled at the time. Go back and repeat the after body and mind. What?
Yes, it was the relation between those two and like physical pain.
It must be
Like,
your computer. Isn't it?
that having those realizations helps as well to process. Yes.
Well, but the process of yeah. Well, I'm sorry, but it was a warble. It must be coming from your system. I don't hear it from other people. From Stephanie's question. But anyway, the relationship of body and mind. So what we're doing, I mean, this I can throw out right. This is the highest yoga tantra. What you're doing is you're purifying the view of the mental, and you're purifying the viewpoint from the viewpoint of the prana. Now we're talking about subtle mind and subtle body. We're not talking about gross body. Subtle body and subtle. So the whole highest yoga tantra path, which we'll start talking about tomorrow, full on, is he goes through these different stages of purifying the mind and the body. And at that level, it's called the union of bliss and emptiness, body and mind. The blissfulness which comes from the body, and the mental, the emptiness which sees the clarity. There's a lot of these two coming together, but it doesn't really come together until you're enlightened, Vajradhara, the unified Vajra state. But meanwhile, you're purifying the prana as well as purifying the thoughts, kind of, so to speak. You're doing kind of a pranayama. I'll give a simple example. Say you're at the point at the beginning where you're trying to get, they say, to come to a subtle mind. This is all very much of what you read. Tantra is dealing with subtle mind. The Sutra, none of it's dealing with subtle mind. All intellectual. It's all not all intellectual, but it's all. Even the meditation, everything. It's not dealing with subtle mind. But this is dealing with subtle mind. So at times we access the subtle mind, like I think Stephanie mentioned yesterday, in a dream. In a dream, you're in a subtle mind. Deep sleep, you're in a subtle mind. And there's other things you're in a subtle mind. And anyway, the way yogis try to get to a subtle mind is they try to do yoga where they do special kinds of pranayamic breathing. They try to bring in from the two side channels all the energy into the central channel, go 4 fingers below the navel, and they try to, and this is where the tummo and these things come from. And when they do this, eventually, if all of the air can come and dissolve in the central channel, no more gross sense consciousness are functioning. They're not functioning. They're not dead. And they're not functioning also when you go into deep sleep. They're not. The gross sense consciousness is hard. But say you're having difficulty. You get the winds to enter at that point 4 feet below the navel by concentrating one point in there with all of your concentration. That's mental, okay? Even your samadhi, you know how to practice more and more and more. So you're doing 1 point of concentration, 4 fingers below the navel at that point. And if you concentrate there one pointedly, then all the winds will go in. But also, one can do that by focusing on the winds, controlling the winds, the winds, which means the prana, to certain kinds of pranayama involves breathing and making a tent by getting to that point. So we're playing both sides. We're playing the physical, which is the prana, and we're physical the mental to make this happen. This first bringing all the air to the central channel. It's kind of related, but I hope that isn't too big. Can you see a relationship there? You can either concentrate or you can do the pranayama, and you can do both to try to get things to happen at that point. Because they're going together. You can play the wind side and you get the mind, and you can play the mind side. And wherever you focus your mind, the winds will go. Wherever you focus you direct the winds, the mind has to go. They're inseparable. I don't know if that helps, but maybe it's a topic that we will go into more because it comes up in the context. In a nutshell, at the level of Tantra, we're not dealing anymore with gross mind. We're not dealing with the things they debate about, the logic and all this stuff. We're discussing it. We're going to do that, bringing up some of the teachings on it. But in the level of practice, it's practicing things that are subtle mind. And even His Holiness, look at this prasangika, madhyamaka, that is logic. And even His Holiness is at the level of subtle mind, some of this goes out the window, you know. Lama Yeshe, he chose one, and he was definitely prasangika. I mean, it was like Sakapa, etc. But a lot of meditation in yogis is based more on a Chitta mantra view, that mind only, controlling the mind. Wherever there's a mind, things appear. It was useful. He taught a text from the 4 or 5 texts of Maitreya, which wasn't prasangika. It was very practical, dealing with the mind. Everything, for example, if you had an object of attachment, now you're just crazy about this person there in front of you and you're going to jump. So, by the time you did this Chandra Kriti 7-point analysis, does this person exist as one, different, either, other, or, all through the logics, by that time, boom, you'd be gone. But with the Chitta Mantra view, you think this is just a manifestation of my mind. This is just your own mind that you're grasping. And it's kind of similar at a deeper level. It's your own projection. But right away you think, it's a tool. Maybe it's not the ultimate philosophical school. You start taking everything that's coming and you take responsibility for it from your own mind. And some of those schools, even though they're supposed to be philosophically lesser, they're very practical. In fact, most of the Tantras just practice on the basis of that view. I'm getting too heavy. Anything else? Okay. Any virtue we may have created through our discussion of the Dharma, going through the Lama Rim path, we're right up to the point of Vajrayana and the Lama Rim path. And we went through a lot of amazing topics, karma, causes of some. May all of those, whatever energy we, not only any realization that might have come, any insight, but also even effort that we put, the effort we put into listening, the effort we put into thinking, may even that serve as a cause for our awakening. Anything we've thought or done, or may it serve as a cause for our awakening. Because only when we are awakened will we be effective or more effective in benefiting sentient beings. And then the nice tune for this one is Lama Sangye Ru Do Wa Chi Kyang Ma De Sala Go Shu. May I quickly become the Buddha, basically, and lead all sentient beings into his divine light state. Thank you very much for your patience. I hope we see you tomorrow, same time, 5 o'clock Indian time.
Thank you.
Great. And think more questions, though tomorrow we won't have time to answer. No, he's going to allow us to go over the hour and a half that we're going to need to. So tomorrow we're going to go through the tantric path. I realized it was almost too much for today, not because we hadn't just gotten the 3 principles down, because usually I just start doing a sadhana. And so to discuss all the points intellectually, whatever. Anyway, the most important point, and I will read it tomorrow, is the one Lama Yeshe said, and this is the way he opens the whole, this is the way it's under the cessation of suffering. And this is our starting point. It's our starting point for all practice. Lama Yeshe, no matter how confused or deluded we may be, the underlying and essential nature of our being is clear and pure. Like clouds in the sky don't damage the light-giving power of the sun. And the ultimate purpose of all spiritual practice, whether they are called Buddhist or not, is to uncover and make contact with this essentially pure nature. That is what we're touching. That's the basis. Or I said when Lama, when there was a question when we went to see this Holy Dalai Lama, what to do about depression, he says, if you realize depression since you birth or what you have, and you realize that your nature is pure. All of the garbage is on top of it. It's not mixed. What we are is pure water, but it's dirty. We have to meditate and clear it. We clear it with our intellect. We clear it with our practice. Basically that, and and then we get into Tantra, we have to have confidence in that, confidence in our pure nature. We have Buddha nature. If we didn't have Buddha nature, nobody would have ever gotten away from Shakti. That's the basis. The rest is just clouds, nonsense, pain, which we have to start shoveling also to clear up. Anyway, thank you very much. We see you tomorrow. Bye-bye. I guess it's a way to turn